listening to the Devoted Dreamers podcast, and I'm your host, Merritt Ansa. I believe God has an unfolding plan for your life, a God-shaped dream just for you. But so much gets in the way, right? Fear, comparison, imposter syndrome. What if I mess this up? You are not alone in those feelings, and I'm so glad you're here for Season 8. Keep listening to gain some transformational tools that will help you release the lies so that you can freely show up in the world, offering your gifts, leaning on God in your weaknesses, and serving His kingdom with the dream He's given you. Hello, devoted dreamers, and welcome to episode 171 of Season 8. This week, I'm talking with dreamer Joanna Meyer, and I am so eager to share this special interview with you today. But before we get into that, I wanted to let you in on something that's coming just for you later this month. We're talking October 2020, if you're listening to this live. This week, I'm wrapping up the beta test of a small group curriculum helping dreamers like you tackle the imposter syndrome mindset that stands in the way of moving forward toward your dream. If fear of failure or rejection, if feeling like you're not enough or that you don't have the credibility or experience to pursue your dream, if those feelings sound really familiar to you, like way too familiar, I want you to kick off 2021 with a transformation in your heart and mind that will unleash you to really go after your dream in the new year. I truly believe that we learn and grow and change when we do the hard work in community with others. So I invite you to join me and other devoted dreamers for this next session of the Imposter Syndrome course. I'm launching another 6-week session before the end of the year. Doors are going to open on October 25th, just for that 1 week, because we want to get started and be able to finish by the new year. So if you'd like to be among the first to know when this course is available again, please drop your email over on the sign-up form at bit.ly/imposter syndrome resolved. And now a little bit more about Joanna. Joanna Meyer serves the Denver Institute for Faith and Work as Director of Public Engagement. I met Joanna several years ago through a mutual friend and have attended multiple events through the Women and Vocation Initiative that she oversees as part of the Institute. There are so many important conversations happening over there, and it's really been super refreshing to engage with her and with the other women that attend. And so we're going to touch on that a bit in this interview. I want you to listen for that. But Joanna brings a perspective to the podcast this week that we don't often get to consider. And that's what it's like to have a dream in your heart and be actively pursuing it, and yet to also have grief connected to the thing you are giving your life to. I'm going to give her the privilege of sharing her story, but I hope you'll come away from this conversation with insight on how to keep perspective even through seasons of grief and lament, and what it looks like to trust and remain faithful to God, even when He hasn't provided the answers you've cried out for. And also permission. I hope you get some permission to let your soul lay fallow for a season, if that's what you need, instead of trying to manage difficult emotions or solve problems that aren't yours to solve. If you're a single woman who's wanting to be married, if you're a married woman longing for children, if you're trying to figure out how to integrate your relational callings, as Joanna names them, with your professional callings, you're going to want to hear every last minute of this honest conversation with my friend Joanna. Okay, I can't wait to share this one with you. Here is my conversation with Joanna Meyer. Hello, Devoted Dreamers, and welcome to the Devoted Dreamers podcast. This is Joanna Meyer. I'm so happy to get to introduce you to her today. We've been friends for a handful of years. She's local here to Denver, and just can't wait for you to hear a little bit of her story. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, it's fun to be with you, Merritt.
Yeah, it's fun. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad. Finally, right? We've been talking about this for months. We'll talk about... You're the Director of Public Engagement for the Denver Institute for Faith and Work, and I know that your dreams are kind of integrated into who you are, what you do. So let's hear it from your voice. Talk about your God-shaped dreams.
Yeah, I feel like my career path has been a bit of a patchwork quilt of random pieces that have come together in this unique job that I have. People often ask me, how in the world did you get trained to do the job that you have? And I think, I just learned it along the way. God has clearly pushed me into this role. So I work for the Denver Institute for Faith and Work, which is part of a independent expression of a national and international movement helping Christians understand how their daily work is part of the broader work that God is doing in the world. And I dream of a day when every person that follows Christ has a vital and vibrant vision for how their callings, whether that is to corporate leadership, the creative arts, to parenthood, to political service, that they would have a vision of how that is a wonderful expression of the gospel, of Christ making all things new. And so I spend my days thinking about how can we best illustrate that for people? How can we equip them to do that? And so part of my dream relates to anyone who is in their daily work. And part of it is very specific to women. I help lead an initiative called the Women in Vocation Initiative that Merritt, you've been part of. We've been having this conversation for a number of years. And I found that many Christian women have never really had a broad, biblically based vision for their various callings in their life. And there's some consequences to that absence. One is that women often experience a lot of guilt and churn as they think through the various commitments that they have to marriage and family or career or community service. They experience that churn because they just don't understand how those pieces fit together in God's purposes in their lives. And one of the other consequences is that I don't think we encourage enough vocational imagination in women. I think our vision for our own gifts being released into the world can be a little bit underdeveloped. And so I dream of a day when women feel like the way they communicate their dreams and their hopes for their lives certainly flow through marriage and family. I know that has been a desire in my own life, but they extend to the far corners of our communities and really the full expression of women's gifts in the world. So I love that I get to work on that project, and I know that the fulfillment of that dream is a long way off. So I'm always asking, what does it look like to move the conversation forward today?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I feel like there must be some days where it feels super nebulous. Like, what do I even do today to push this big thing forward?
Yeah, recently I was talking to somebody, and I just had to admit that in some ways it feels like we might be a generation away from really seeing a sense of like freedom and full acceptance of women's gifts in the world. And I say that even from a non-spiritual perspective, more when I think about women being fully vested in leadership in our world. It's going to take a while to get there.
Yeah, and just anybody who is in the midst of maybe like where I am, everything feels like if I don't put things in compartments and just do one thing at a time in this moment, it's all going to fall apart, or like all the plates are going to come crashing down, like I can't do 6 things at once.
I know you're not alone. I heard a conversation with some leading entrepreneurs who are leading at the executive level, and that was front of mind in their conversation of how in the world do you fulfill all of these things, or how do you hold the things that are dear to you together when they all demand your time and you don't have enough hours in the day to fulfill them.
Well, important conversations happening, and I have always walked away from your events just with so much on my mind and hopefulness in my heart for continuing this conversation. So thanks for bringing it here.
Oh, I love it. I think we need more. I think we need in the Christian world, we need more female heroes. There's so many people we look up to, and I think our definition of women of faith can sometimes be a little bit too narrow. We just need more and broader examples. And so it's fun to be able to find those women and give them a platform from which to share how God's working in their lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for doing that. So on this journey, what have been some of the fears or the struggles? What has been challenging to you along the way?
That is the $1 million question, Merritt. And it's something that you and I have talked about often in the last probably year or two. And one of the challenges that I have faced is that as hard as I advocate for women being able to integrate their callings to, I call them your relational callings to marriage and family with your professional or community callings, I have not had that opportunity yet to be developing my relational callings to motherhood and to marriage. which has been really challenging. And so I can encourage other people towards faithfulness in those roles of being a wife and mother, but I haven't seen the Lord provide them in my own life. So I'm in my mid-40s, and it certainly isn't for lack of trying. People often look at me and say, so have you tried online dating? And I'm like, have I tried it? Yes, absolutely. But the Lord hasn't necessarily chosen to provide. Marriage is one of my callings. And in the last year, I've had some medical difficulties, which means that I've lost the ability to have biological children. And even though at 46, I wasn't necessarily holding my breath that a stork would come deliver a baby for me, it was still such a loss to realize that that is not a dream that would be fulfilled in my life. And so that's been a really interesting challenge to figure out, how do I continue to hold this mission that I feel like the Lord has called me to, when at a heart level, I'm just dying because I know that I won't be able to experience the fullness of what I want other women to experience. So that's been a real journey to figure out how to hold those in tension.
I'm going to ask I don't know, hard question, but I mean, I feel like the word that comes to mind, and I know, God receives all of our words with incredible grace, I think. But it just seems a little bit unfair, right? Like,
yeah,
to have this calling on your heart and yet have to navigate I haven't been there myself. I want this for you. I want it for me, but I don't have the life experience for the thing that God's put on your heart.
Yeah.
To fight for.
Yeah. And I definitely have had that conversation with the Lord, that this doesn't seem fair. And a good friend of mine who has been through the similar medical journey that I have had has been honest with me. And she said, in all the things the Lord promises us, one thing that he does not promise is fairness. And so I've had to really sit with that, of realizing the Lord, you can be good and loving towards me, even if there's heartbreak in that. And so that's, before we hit record, we started talking about how are you doing? And I feel like I'm at about, 90% healed up from the surgery I had this summer. And there's 10% that's still getting solved. And emotionally, it kind of feels the same way, I'm doing okay. But that last 10% is deep and dark and heavy. And it may be, a good friend said, this may be something that you carry with you for life. And it may not always be front of mind or as painful as it is now, but this is definitely a loss of a dream, and certainly can be fulfilled in other ways. But I do know that it's a death that I will not have the desire to be a mom biologically be fulfilled in my lifetime. And so it's just kind of sitting with the Lord on that and being like, what does this mean? And I know I'm not alone in that. There may be women listening that are like, Joanna, I am right there with you. So I welcome their input in my life of how to navigate this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think some of my listeners know that I'm right there with you. My children are not biological. And I think even just reading your notes, I was like, oh, right.
Yeah. You remember that.
I remember that. So I forget it a lot, but I remember it. And I do love, I think I know who your friend is that you're talking about, that's reminded us that God doesn't promise fairness. And that's, it's important to know. He's still good, but all the puzzle pieces aren't always going to fit together the way we have the board laid out, right?
Totally. Or even in the time that we wish it would happen. And that's been a little bit, what's been hard for me, being in my mid-40s, is I've been sitting with this for a while, this desire to be married has been part of my life, probably, since I was a little girl, but seriously, since my early 20s. And so you really have to pound the table with the Lord and be like, how long, oh Lord? It's encouraging to see that that's a very biblical, biblical form of expressing your emotions. So I'm not alone in that.
No, not at all. So on that note, how have you kind of found scripture or faith practices? What are you doing with this reality within you and your life?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that have been helpful. One is realizing that lament is very biblical, and it's a powerful spiritual practice, that you almost need to have a tangible expression of grief. And if people aren't familiar with what lament is, just like if you if you hurt yourself physically, you would have a way of crying out in pain. Lament is kind of spiritually expressing pain, and Scripture is filled with that. The Psalms are just soaked in a sense of disappointment, fear, outcry over the pain. And so realizing that that's something that the Lord gives us to help us process through those unanswered questions in our lives is really powerful. So we were talking about the idea of if you don't deal with them in a healthy way, it can really start to pickle your soul. So that has been really helpful to have, just to acknowledge that it's okay to have a season of that. And another thing that has been helpful is realizing that I needed to let my soul lay fallow for a little while. I was trying so hard to manage the emotions around this transition in my life that it almost was making me more upset at times because I was trying to push so hard to solve it. And for a season, and I emphasize for a season, it has been really good to let my heart just kind of lay fallow, because I had tried almost everything. I had tried every spiritual formula in the book. If I just pray this way, or if I have a conversation with a spiritual director that addresses this, or if I read that book. And I think I just had to reach a point where I'm like, I have done everything I know how to do to try and kind of manage the grief or try to remain hopeful. And it was really helpful for me to just be able to lay down any kind of spiritual processes for a season, because I tried everything. I just needed to acknowledge, like, I'm kind of done, Lord. And I wasn't done with him, but I was done with trying to force myself from pain towards optimism. And the crazy thing is that in that season of just letting it lay a little bit, the Lord has brought back just some new glimmers of optimism that are really encouraging, that I could never have manufactured myself. But it only came when I kind of just quietly gave up a little bit, that he was able to sneak back in.
It feels really humbling to, I guess, maybe humble yourself before him and just say, okay, you know better than me. Your plan is better than mine. Your timing is perfect. And yeah, it always brings me back to Job. It's like, well, who are you? Who are you, Job? Were you there when I, made the ocean?
Totally.
And, it's like, yeah. Oh, right.
And I don't know if we haven't talked about this, Merritt, but I don't know if you can relate to this, but sometimes I think in my faith community, I almost was embarrassed, or felt like I had to justify just needing a season of rest. Either people that didn't understand the grief that I was experiencing, or people that were uncomfortable with things that aren't resolved in your life, don't always know how to deal with it. And that's convicting for me, because I'm sure I've done this to my friends, where I try and provide solutions to them, or just nudge them into activity to move them past where they are. And there are certainly seasons where we need to do that, but for me, I just reached a point where I just needed a season where I could just sit with the Lord in my grief. And so it takes a unique skill as a friend to be present with our friends in that.
I would confess that I am not great at that.
Not many people are.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if anybody out there has a dream to help people be better at being a good friend when life is hard, I want to hear it.
Yeah. And the word ambiguity is so powerful. Like, I had a friend who described it as ambiguous grief, because you don't always send often we're not good with people who are experiencing loss, like the death of a loved one, or because we don't always have the right answers for them. And so instead of being present with them, we'll avoid them entirely, or we don't have the words to say, so we don't say anything. And I think ambiguous grief, like kind of what I experienced, where it doesn't fit, it's not as obvious as if a funeral's happening or something like that. Although a friend did offer, she said, maybe you need to have a funeral this summer after my surgery. And I was like, I don't think I'm quite willing to do that in such a public way. But she was a good enough friend that she goes, if what you need is a funeral, then I will stand with you and we will have a funeral. But sometimes we don't have, I know, isn't that a great friend? When we don't have the answers to say, we just don't know how to be present with that. And I think that's an area we can all grow in.
Yeah, and it seems really relevant, especially right now, where there are a lot of really hard things happening in the world. And it seems easier to just shut off the news and walk away and pretend it's not going on.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, it's actually more loving to pick it up and have a conversation with your people,
Yeah. And if I could offer a word of encouragement to the many moms that are out there, is just that that I see how much you are juggling in this season, and I see how hard some of you are struggling. I am watching that closely in my role. And I just want you to hear that we know how hard you're working, and that it's okay if you feel like you're not doing it completely right. And if you're failing in a lot of ways, so if you're juggling home education and working from home, and the ambiguity of when stuff will be changing and when life will be back to normal, and disappointment, there's a lot of emotions swirling around in your life these days. And so just know that you are seen and prayed for and supported in the middle of it.
And that we will all be changed by this, I mean, that's kind of the other a little bit scary part. Like, what is life going to look like? Who am I going to be at the end of this season, or if there is an end?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for that. Thank you for seeing us.
On a heavy note, note.
Well, I would love to hear you talk more about your work and about the things that the Denver Institute has going on and coming up, and ways that people could begin to engage in some more of these conversations. I mean, like we said earlier before recording, like everything's online now. There's so much, we have access to so much online. And so, anybody who's feeling like, oh yes, these conversations about women and work and calling, and, how do I engage with people who are thinking about what I'm thinking about? Tell us more.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that has been so surprising in the midst of letting go of certain things that I hoped God would bring to bear in my own life is that He continues to provide opportunities in new directions. And so I've had to just say, okay, Lord, help me trust you in this. Help me lead on a bigger scale and move forward in new ways, that your purposes are different than what I thought they would be, and yet I can embrace them and move forward. And so, as you said, a lot of work around public events is online these days. And what's amazing about it is that it allows what had previously been a local conversation to become national. And so just a couple of weeks ago, Denver Institute led a team of 7 different faith and work organizations from around the country. We had more than 700 people on an online call talking about faith and politics. It was called The Politics of Neighborly Love. And it was absolutely amazing to be able to meet a very deep heart need for a lot of people who are struggling in this season, when they don't feel like there's always an easy or an authentic way to engage the political process as a Christian. It was so life-giving to be able to lead a coalition of people that want to have a different conversation about this. And so I see the Lord just saying, hey, I got work for you to do, and I'm inviting you into that. And so that was really fun. And even with our annual event called Women, Work, and Calling, which will be at the end of October, that's usually just a couple hundred people in the Denver area. We gather at a local church and we talk about it. And this year, I have no idea how big it's going to be. Because it's online. And so you have listeners from all over the country, maybe all over the world, and we would invite them into this conversation. We have 10 different organizations this time who said we want to be able to invite our women into this conversation. And so that'll be Saturday, October 24th. I know in the show notes you'll provide a link for women that want to learn a little bit more about that. You can always check out the events page at denverinstitute.org. But that's going to be an amazing conversation, because we're starting from a conversation of what does it look like to have resilience in our lives in a challenging time, specifically as it relates to our daily work, whether that is work as a mother or work as a CEO. What does it look like to be resilient in that? And so we'll have a chance to hear from women that their names may not be known to you because they're not always platform names, and yet they are exemplars of a life of faith. So we'll be hearing from women like Bethany Jenkins, who is a high-level leader with the Veritas Forum, through Mindy Caliguire, who I know that you've met, Merritt, who is a national leader in the area of soul care and also works in the tech industry. So she's going to talk about how do we experience God in the context of our callings. We're going to interview Nancy Duarte, who's one of the top corporate communications experts in the country, and she's also a Christian woman who's deeply committed to her faith. And you'll hear how she integrates Christian principles in her life as a CEO, and leading a very pluralistic company. So all kinds of amazing conversations with politicians and filmmakers and CEOs and culture makers. So I cannot wait to share that conversation with women all over the country. And that wouldn't have been possible if the pandemic hadn't happened, or it wouldn't have happened in this way had the pandemic not happened. And also, I think in the midst of grieving changes in my own life, the Lord's inviting me forward to lead a coalition of organizations in a different way to further this conversation. So, you do have moments where you think, who am I, oh Lord, that you would work in this way. So we would love for your listeners to be included.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Yeah. And we're going to give away a ticket, which is really fun and generous. Thank you so much for offering that. So I'm going to do that on Instagram the rest of this week when this episode goes live. And so go on over there and check for that. I'll put the link in the show description and the show notes. But yeah, we just want to for sure spread the word about this because it isn't just Denver people that can attend this time. And
it's anybody.
Yeah. And I think I've been to all of them. Is this?
I know you've been so supportive.
The fourth one?
An important part of the conversation. Yeah, this probably is the fourth one that we've done.
Yeah. It's been so good. It's been so good.
Yeah. We just, in faith circles, we don't often broaden the conversation for women. And often the people that we listen to are incredible godly women, but they're leading in a very specific area of life, often in ministry leadership or they're authors or influencers. And so it's amazing to think, what does it look like when you hear from a woman who's a CEO or a woman that's a documentary filmmaker about what does it look like to live out her faith in this context? So it gets our imaginations going and just a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. I will be sure to share.
Yeah.
And listeners, please do share it out because I have never walked away from one of these going, oh, that was a waste of my time. Like, it's just so important. Because and I think that's the thing. I don't make time to think about these kinds of topics unless I'm sitting down with Joanna Meyer.
That's awesome. It's fun. We're doing the main event is on the Saturday 24th, but we realize that a lot of women probably don't want to spend their days staring at a computer screen. So we spread the content out over a month. It's going to be like a veritable festival of learning. And so we're doing some webinars, webinars after the event. And one of the topics of one of the webinars is navigating a 2-career marriage, which I personally, even though I'm not married, I think is super important because often we'll give women this vision of like navigating their various callings. And I also deep inside realize like, oh, I am sending you out into a buzzsaw. Like if I don't equip you to figure out how to really handle the complexity of these callings. So I just think like, what a gift to talk to a marriage therapist and a number of couples who are organizational and corporate leaders about how in the world they juggle 2 big careers in one household. So I think conversations like that are important once we're not having enough.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So how do we find out and get connected to the webinars and the, after the events?
You can go to denverinstitute.org/events and you'll see that we have Women Working Calling is right there and you'll get all the information about it.
Awesome. Okay. So sweet. I'm thrilled that people all over are going to get a chance to get introduced to you guys.
Well, thanks.
Well, I would love to hear you just share kind of from an overarching sense, how has the Lord transformed you by not only like giving you such a unique career calling and vision, but also taking you through seasons of lament and disappointment? Like, what has He done in you since you started down this path?
Yeah, this is still very much a work in progress. Very much a work in progress. But I have been surprised at how the Lord has honed my voice and vision for walking with Him. Like, I think had my life turned out very differently if I had gotten married or had kids a lot earlier, I don't think I would be the person that I am. And I don't think I would have the same capacity. And that doesn't reflect everyone, just in my own journey. I think my capacity and ability to serve would just be shaped in a different way. And so I think He's in the process of transforming me to invite me to have confidence and clarity in stewarding that vision for my life. I've been begging Him to give me a different life. And I think He's asking me to steward faithfully the life He has given me. And that's where the transformation is happening. I think accepting that for the path that He's given me and also fully stepping into it and all that it can represent. So it'll be fun to see where it leads in the next few years.
Thanks for listening today. Don't let the conversation end here. Let's connect over in the Devoted Dreamers Insiders group on Facebook. We're building a sweet community of dreamers, so no one has to walk this road alone. You can find the group at bit.ly/dreamergroup. I'll see you in there.